Railways are part of the fabric of London, and love them or hate them, without them, the city couldn't function, and it certainly wouldn't have grown to the size it is today. London's sometimes troubled relationship with the train began more than 150 years ago. I've come to the Kew Bridge Steam Museum to find out how the railways came to London. This lovely little loco was originally built to shift slate round a quarry in Wales, but she's just like all the locomotives that took coal from barges on the Thames up to boiler houses inland. And basically she's the younger sister of the big steam locomotives that brought trains into London from north, south, east and west, smashing down slums and causing new suburbs to be built. Now, Phil, how's she going?
Not so bad, thank you very much.
Good. Will she ride with me on board?
Oh yeah, I think we can.
Go on, let's go.
Right.
The world's first ever steam locomotive was built by the brilliant Cornish mining engineer Richard Trevithick in South Wales. This was 1804 and it pulled 10 tons of pig iron from the Penydarren Ironworks down to the bay at Abercynon. Now, tell me how Trevithick brought the steam loco to London.
Well, obviously with 1804 and the Penydarren tramway worked so well, he decided that he would broaden his horizons and came up to London with his roundabout railway called Catch Me If You Can Railway.
So this was a sort of fairground ride?
Fairground ride, charged a penny, but unfortunately wasn't financially successful.
Trevithick's circular railway at Euston Square ran for only 2 months. It had one major problem. The weight of the 8-ton engine kept cracking the rail.
Trevithick broke all the rails?
Yes, because of the heavy weight of the engine, they were using wood and iron rails. The engine was breaking the rails on the joint.
Trevithick's rails were made of brittle cast iron, and it wasn't until George Stephenson came up with a wrought iron alternative that the railway age really arrived. Terminus of the new railway line was at Euston. The Victorians built elaborate and imposing stations in order to reassure their passengers that rail travel was safe. This neoclassical arch stood until the 1960s, when developers levelled it when they redesigned the station on what they thought were more practical lines. These gatehouses are all that remain. Rumour has it that the arch itself is at the bottom of the Lee River. Not all Victorian railway stations were destroyed, some still survive, like this gem, St Pancras.
The Victorians loved building huge, great railway stations with massive engine sheds, and this is St Pancras, from the great Victorian building at the end to this huge arch here. They really liked showing off. And now it's a building site because Eurostar is going to come here, and the Eurostar trains are 400 metres long, so they've had to extend it all the way to there, double the length of the engine sheds. It's going to be fantastic, and you'll be able to go direct from here to Paris in 2¼ hours. All I need is a ticket. To find out how this vast building site works, I've come to meet the contract manager, Ailey McAdam. Ailey, how many chaps have you got working here?
About 850 at the moment.
Wow. Who built this building in the first place?
William Barlow. He was the designer and he also supervised the construction. Tremendous achievement. At its time, this was the largest single arch building in the world.
Now, surely the roof's always been black corrugated iron, hasn't it?
No, what you see there is a temporary cover.
So what was there before?
Ridge and furrow, which is like valley
glass.
Trough, glass. And we're returning it back to its former glory, so to speak.
You're putting in glass again?
That's right. We have light streaming down into the shed, making this whole building feel completely different than it does at the moment.
Well, I think that's absolutely fantastic. Can we go and have a look downstairs?
Let's go.
Right. So now we're down underneath the platforms, right? The trains are coming up there.
That's right.
And this is underground.
Yes.
And this is still Victorian.
Yeah, this is what we call the undercroft, which was created because when Barlow was looking at building St Pancras Station, he decided to come in over the canal rather than under the canal. Our next door station, King's Cross, comes under the canal and the platform's there at a ground level.
Right.
Because he came in over the canal, he had to elevate the platforms at the first floor, creating this huge void underneath, which was a massive basement.
Yes.
Which he actually used it as beer storage.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the big reasons for creating St Pancras Pancras was the Midlands at the time were booming, coal and beer, and he wanted to be the main outlet for the whole of London. So he used this area as storing beer.
This would be full of barrels then?
Full of barrels. An interesting fact is that the distance between these columns is exactly 3 beer barrel lengths. That was one of his design specifications.
Wonderful. So these are original Victorian columns?
They are. They're cast iron columns. They've been here for 150 years.
Now look, I don't want to worry you in any way, but there does seem to be a hole here. Is that deliberate, or have you made a mistake?
Part of our design is to cut a hole in the old train deck slab, and what that will do, when light will stream down from the new roof that we're putting on.
Right, so that's all going to be glass?
That's all going to be glass. Stream down through the glass into this area here, and we're reusing this area to house passengers for the international departures, arrivals, passport control, customs, immigration. We're reusing this vast space.
Because Ancaster, Ketton, the tiles on the roof were from Leicestershire, mainly. It's all from the Midlands.
Amazing.
Not all of London's stations are quite as grand as St Pancras, but the remarkable thing is that the city has so many mainline stations, 12 in all. Landowners and Parliament tried to keep the railways out of the centre of the city, and so we have an arc of stations in North London from east to west, and the big 3 in the south. Only Charing Cross and Victoria are really in the centre. But all this led to terrible congestion on the roads between all these stations. A solution was desperately needed.
I'm sitting here with Christian Wolmar, who has just written the definitive book about the London Underground. Christian, why did London need an underground?
Well, if you imagine London in the mid-Victorian age, it was a very crowded place. The roads were complete chaos. There were carts, there were horses, carriages, probably something like Calcutta is today. And so they really had to kind of think, what can we do about this?
How did they actually build the line?
Well, the early underground railways were built by cut and cover. They basically dug up the streets, put a railway inside and covered it over again. And that was kind of a pretty crude way of doing it, but it was very effective.
Cut and cover was a messy business. Every time a new line was dug, whole neighbourhoods were thrown into disarray.
Underneath the roads was a mass of cables, pipes, sewers and all sorts of stuff, which they kept digging up. And then they left piles of dirt and tools all over the roads, and eventually people started to complain. The Metropolitan did make some attempt to compensate them, but only in rich areas. Poor people who were thrown out of slums got nothing when the slums were pulled down. Here in posh Bayswater, where they extended the Metropolitan line, they made an attempt to cover up the mess. And if you look here, there's a very elegant row of houses. If you come along this side, suddenly, look, all the windows are fake. They've been painted over. And if you look at the front door here, there's no handle. There's no letterbox. It's concrete. Messenger boys and postmen, young new postmen, have been sent here ever since to play jokes on them, because there's no house here. It's just a front. And behind it, there's nothing but a railway line. Come and have a look. Here we are. Here's the back of that same... look! A tube line right underneath. There's no house. In the old days, you see, they had to leave a hole to allow all the smoke and steam to come out. Now they don't need the hole, but there's just a gap between the houses held up by those great girders. It is wonderful.
The advent of electric trains and new tunnelling techniques meant that deep-level tube lines were able to be built. This led to a massive expansion of the underground network in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
What influence did the underground have on the way that London was built?
Wherever it went, if there were green fields there when it was built, within a few years, most of the green fields would be gone, because basically it stimulated the growth of housing. So in a way, the transport system was built before the houses were there. It created a London, as it were.
Railways changed the face of London forever. Not only were new suburbs built, but old areas were knocked down and populations were uprooted.